Bitcoin really made the turn from being this is going to make me and my family rich to this is the revolution, which is going to move the world into a new earth. This is going to be a part of that. It made that switch for me when my son was born. Kids are more in touch with their higher selves than we are as adults. That's what being connected to your highest self is. You become so comfortable with who you are, things become way less serious and way more fun. We know that we're living in less than 1 millionth of reality right now, what we're experiencing. Who's to say that there is no possibility that there can't be other sentient life forms living in these other vibrational fields which we can't experience with our five senses?
One of the things that really blows my mind about Bitcoin is that I feel like it doesn't come from this 0.001% realm that we're currently living in. It feels like we're touching something from a different realm, and it's bridging different realms in a way that we've never seen before. Today on The Signal, I'm joined by Caleb from the Bitcoin consciousness community. We're going to talk about the Fiat You versus the Decentralized You, how Bitcoin reshapes identity, and what conscious parenting looks like in a fear-based world. Caleb, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Excellent. Yeah, well, it's great to see you. We met in person in El Salvador. That was amazing. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I was so excited to first find your stuff online about a year or so ago when I was making these connections between Bitcoin and spirituality. I couldn't believe that someone had already started a community around those two ideas.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to see what you've created. And it was really cool to finally meet you in person just a few weeks back.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm super happy to hear that Bitcoin consciousness and the community of people are resonating with you and new people are continuing to find their way into the community too.
Yeah, so for the listeners who don't know what the Bitcoin consciousness community is, can you talk about what it is and when you started it and why you started it?
Yeah, for sure. So the Bitcoin consciousness community, you could almost call it like the Bitcoin consciousness project, um, is a project which it is about the people. So community is also a great interchangeable word. Um, it explores the idea is to explore the parallels between Bitcoin and spirituality. Um, and I would say probably it's more focused on spirituality than it is on Bitcoin in particular. The Bitcoin is kind of the thing that a lot of people in the community really value and understand, but the underlying idea, the underlying value amongst a lot of the people in the community is that the buck, there's a phrase in the United States called the buck stops with you. I don't remember which president coined that phrase, but effectively what it means is that the responsibility for your own life is your own. And that's not just on like managing your finances or managing your diet or managing how you carry yourself day to day. It's seeing the world from a lens of vibration from, I guess you could say, quantum physics, and seeing the world as something that you are creating. Every step you take, everything you experience is a manifestation of your own creation. Now, I'm getting a little bit into some of the models that I believe specifically. There are people in the community who are more religious and they have different models. So maybe they're Christian and they have different ideas. Um, but I would say, yeah, Bitcoin consciousness, that's kind of the main idea is that if you're truly taking the highest level of ownership for your life, it comes with your spiritual connection to this life and your deepest purpose. Um, one thing that one of the phrases that we often use, or one of the models that we use, similar to Bitcoin, is that what we're trying to attain is a connection to your inner node. And that node is your soul. It is the God within you. And we all have, we all are a part of the same ocean of spirituality, the same God. And we're all connected through like this universal network. You would, another parallel to Bitcoin, called the creation network. So that's one of the analogies that we kind of throw around a lot, is connecting to your inner node on the creation network, and having the deepest level of decentralization that you can in your own life, being the authority of your own life.
Yeah, it's fascinating, all the deep connections between Bitcoin and spirituality. And it's so counterintuitive. People don't think that Bitcoin, they say, what does that have to do with spirituality? They seem like
Yeah,
opposite ends of the spectrum.
right.
And from an outsider's perspective, you can definitely see why they would have that perspective, because that's what I thought at first too about crypto and Bitcoin. I thought they were kind of on the opposite end of
Yeah,
spirituality.
yeah, 100%, because the first impression of Bitcoin is the first impression of all of crypto, you might say.
Mhm.
Like I don't even, I really don't like to use the word crypto. And when anybody else asks me like, "Hey, are you still into crypto, or did you go to that crypto
Mhm.
conference?" Like, no, I didn't go to a crypto conference. I went to a Bitcoin
Yeah.
conference, because it's just, yeah, when the two are conflated, it completely confuses the entire idea of the revolution that is Bitcoin. And I
Mhm.
think the level of personal responsibility that comes with valuing a better money. Um, yeah,
So, have you always been on the spiritual path? Because for myself, I've always been on the spiritual path, but I found that it was more intellectual. It wasn't until I found Bitcoin where I was able to kind of embody a lot of the principles that I had been learning my whole life. And that's why I
interesting.
value Bitcoin so much, is that I finally was able to embody these principles that I had been trying to intellectualize my entire life. So
Right.
I'm just curious what your spiritual path was like, and when did Bitcoin come into that?
I have I've been in and out of spirituality, I would say, kind of my whole life. When I was a kid, my mom and dad started taking us to church because I went to a Christian preschool, and I was coming home knowing a lot more about the Bible and stories in the Bible than my dad. And he was like, "Gosh, I we really should start like going to church together, and having this common shared value system." And I remember at one point in my childhood having such a strong faith in Jesus that I truly felt that if I really wanted to, that I could walk on water. Like I felt that connected to him.
Mm.
Um, and even in those times, it was like I didn't ever feel like I needed to prove that faith, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
when I was a kid, I had that faith. That faith was there. I was like, I know I can do this. But I also know that in order to do it, it requires a lot. It requires a lot of me to kind of surrender, and in order to actually pull that feat off. So there was something in me that always kind of knew that there was something more to this reality, and that what Jesus was doing with his life was something that any of us could do. Um, so I would say, yeah, I regularly attended church, was involved with the church up until about college, and then college time, and I think this is probably a common story for a lot of people. There, it oftentimes becomes a time in life for people where religion really goes on the back burner, and even in social circles. Like I was in a fraternity, and you were either Christian or you really weren't. And if you were, you didn't really talk about it. It was like kind of not cool, because if you were truly Christian, or like openly about it, it would sort of be off-putting to people for to kind of follow those values, and people would think you were maybe prudish, or that
Mhm.
there was sort of like a social stigma to
Yeah.
it a little bit. So if you really, really wanted to fit in, so that's what I did. I wanted to fit in. So yeah, I kind of like I wouldn't say I don't really remember being atheist per se. I don't think I've ever really been like, nope, spirituality is not a thing. But instead, I've been more mixed between scientific and spirituality, and that was, like you said, more of an intellectual phase for me. And I've always been that way myself. I've always loved asking why. So
Mhm.
I've had like kind of this on and off between spirituality, but the whole time I've always been on the philosophical journey, which is always asking why. Like, why is it this way? Why is it this way? And just not being uncomfortable to ask that question. Because I think that a lot of times most people stop asking why because they get uncomfortable or they get confused, which I guess is also, uncomfortable. Because once you ask why so many times, it's like, okay, this is just getting too hard to like figure out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop asking why. So yeah, the philosophical route, I've always been willing to ask questions. Um, so then how did I get into less? I think one thing that was helpful with the college time frame is I began to question religion in general. Like I began to see positive things in all religions. I could see that in general, it seemed like most people who were dedicating themselves to a religion, I would say the average person who was dedicating themselves to any religion, they had a a very honorable value set, right? Because they were conducting their lives in a way that was greater than just the collection of stuff or, like, the material things that people tend to pride themselves on. They're truly about connecting themselves to something greater. And so it was between that and then also just I started questioning certain things because in the in every religion there seem to be things that are always contradicting one another, right? So you kind of have I started to kind of see, actually, of all things, the Da Vinci Code is another great example of this because the Da
Mhm.
Vinci Code, which the church didn't like at the time, it calls into question some of the things. It basically brings to light this idea that perhaps the religion in some aspects was manipulated in order to control
Mhm.
people. And so I kind of being open-minded, I kind of took that in stride and I started seeing the religion in that way and saying, okay, I can see now how perhaps some of these things are more control mechanisms than they are a way for me to get closer to God. Um, and then from from there, I guess it was, I've always been open-minded, and it was Reiki actually that I kind of stumbled across through my wife. She did a Reiki session. I
Mhm.
think she had heard about Reiki through TikTok or something, and so she did a Reiki session, and she had like these amazing visions and stuff. And so I was like, I gotta try this. This sounds super interesting.
Mhm.
And so did one Reiki session, bawled my eyes out. It was
Oh.
insane. I started bawling in the middle of the session. Super powerful. Uh, Went back and did it several other times. And from then, it just kind of just kept building, I guess.
Mhm.
So that's a super long story. Do you have anything you want me to elaborate further on?
Well, at what point did Bitcoin enter the picture?
So Bitcoin came into the picture for me in like 2019, actually. So right as COVID was kind of hitting the radar a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I had heard Guy Swan come on a libertarian podcast, and I started learning about blockchain. I wanted to read like, what is this? Like, I want to know exactly what blockchain is. What is so special about this? And I kind of went down or took the stance completely unfounded, but I kind of took the stance like, oh, blockchain, not Bitcoin. I
Mm.
didn't know what I was saying, but that seemed like the popular stance to take. So that's what I did for a little bit anyway. So I started learning specifically about blockchain, but I got this book on blockchain, started reading about it, and I'm like, yeah, but how? How do you put Uber on a blockchain? How do you put this on a blockchain? And I actually happened to because we had moved, and I put a post on Craigslist to do some handyman work, and somebody reached out to me and they said they asked if I would be interested in installing some Bitcoin ATMs, and I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" Because I'm really interested in
Mm.
Bitcoin right now. I'm really interested in blockchain, and this whole time I've been listening to various podcasts and stuff like this. So it really was just kind of pure coincidence that I got into Bitcoin at the same time that I was into spirituality. So I would say that maybe Bitcoin came first in that 2019 timeframe, and then
Mm.
following year, maybe 20, either 20 or 21 is when I started doing the Reiki sessions. So, and like the Bitcoin really made the turn from being this is going to make me and my family rich, the legacy. It made the switch from being that to this is the revolution, which is going to, move the world into a new earth. This is going to be a
Mm.
part of that. It made that switch for me when my son was born,
Mm.
which you heard that story on Sats Chats probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was just like a complete shift in time frames. It's in time perspective. It's like, wow, holding my son in that hospital room, being with my wife and my son. It's like I don't this is where I value my time the most, Like I don't I don't want to be anywhere else right now. What sucks is I was hourly, so the time that I was taking off, I was like, I gotta go back to work tomorrow. I wasn't
Mm.
getting paid. So I was like I was a contract laborer. So I was like, I gotta go back to work tomorrow to earn money, which loses value. It's like so that was a big
Mm.
shift to like, hey, this is a revolution here. So
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. If you were trying to describe to somebody how Bitcoin and spirituality are so connected, what would you say?
how Bitcoin and spirituality are so connected.
Like for me, I think a big part of it is the decentralized nature of Bitcoin. I had
Yeah.
never really known about what decentralization was, so Bitcoin introduced me to the concept of decentralization, and then
Right.
just seeing how that can be applied to everything else, basically. And it actually ties into, I've heard you use this metaphor before about how we're all just drops of water,
Hmm.
but we all ultimately come from the ocean, and we're all
Right.
fractals of the ocean. And so
Hmm.
we're all essentially decentralized. Consciousness is basically decentralized in its architecture in the same way that the Bitcoin network is.
Hmm.
And so when I started seeing it like that, that's when I started realizing that Bitcoin is just one part of this bigger transition into this decentralized world. And it's an absolute necessity to have a money like Bitcoin that's decentralized in order to allow the world and humanity to move into this more decentralized 5D world.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent way to put it. I'll absolutely echo that. The what came up for me is I was thinking about fear.
Mm.
So much of how, huh, so much of how we view the world from the old perspective, from the fiat perspective, is through the lens of fear. And, as a parent who is beginning to kind of drop a lot of that stuff, it's becoming really difficult to figure out how to parent in this world. Um, and I think Bitcoin is an excellent representation of that. because effectively you are putting your trust in something universal once again instead of other human beings who effectively at the end of the day say that we'll protect this with guns, we'll protect this with
Mm-hmm.
force, right? Um, the universal principle of consciousness is unconditional love. And I think that the universal principle of Bitcoin is mathematics. So I think you're just moving from being in a world that is based on fear to being one that is based on universal principles.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that reminds me of what you told me when we met at the retreat about how, because I've been doing a lot of work on like emotional regulation and nervous system regulation, and you told this story that stuck with me about how with your kids, um, they could do the exact same thing one day as they did the other a different day, and your reaction can be completely different, even though
Yeah,
they're doing the exact same thing.
right,
And you had kind of traced it back to fear. One on one of the occasions, you let fear dictate your response, whereas on the other day, maybe you didn't have so much fear, and it allowed you to not be so reactive to it.
right.
That was a
Yeah.
very powerful story that you told. Can you kind of expand on that a little?
Yeah, for sure. Hmm. Yeah, so I'll just use an example. So when when I start my day, sometimes, oh, one second, he's here. How you doing? Well, what's going on? This is Dr. Satoshi. We're doing a
Hi,
podcast right now.
very nice to
Oh,
meet you.
we could probably cut him out.
Very nice to meet you.
Oh, sorry.
Th-
Here,
Daddy.
okay. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for letting your dad come hang out with me in El Salvador. It was really cool to meet him in person. You're very lucky to have such a nice dad.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, what did you need to tell me?
I figured out how to go, use my thing to go, the controller to go left and right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Know how to do it.
Good job. All right, well, can you go upstairs so I can finish
Mm-hmm.
my conversation with Dr. Satoshi? I'll see you in the morning, okay?
See you in the morning.
All right. I love you.
Bye, Dr. Satoshi.
See you later.
All right. Well, I guess not so coincidentally, we got interrupted by
That
him.
was pretty cool.
So, that's a perfect representation, right? So, I would say, like in this conversation, we'll probably get in this idea more deeply, but in this conversation, I don't feel I don't feel afraid to be authentic with you. And so I'm speaking more authentically from my node. I'm in a state of higher vibration, higher consciousness. I'm not quite so affected by fear. A really great reference to this for your listeners is the Power as a book, Power versus Force, where basically they create a scale of all of the different emotions, and fear is way down here vibrationally. It's at the very bottom. When you're up here, there's a bunch of different, but let's just say, you're more connected to your soul, your highest self. You don't experience that fear so much, right? If let's say I was on a call with an investor or something and I was trying to make a bunch of money and he came in, it might be like, oh God, what am I gonna do? Like
Mhm.
he could completely destroy, interrupt. This is so unprofessional, blah blah blah. It's like the reaction is gonna be completely different than letting him come in and just be a part of the conversation, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and often actually what I find is that a lot of the fears that I have as a dad are related to money. Um, in some way or another. Like one of the weirdest reactions that I have on a day to day and it's so funny because I speak about it like it's so trivial, but I still get caught up in it, is snack time. It drives me crazy when the kids want to just eat snacks all day. And then I prepare meals with what I believe to be like good, healthy food. But because they've been snacking all day, then they don't eat the food. And it drives me crazy because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm afraid that number one, that their bodies aren't getting nourished the way that they're supposed to be. They're eating all this. It's not like super processed because we're trying to get healthier food and stuff, but still, it's coming out of a wrapper instead of being something that's coming off the stovetop. And then also on the money front, it's like these, per calorie, uh, the food out of the pantry that's, pantry, the snacks, those are more expensive. So it's like you're burning through all these snacks when I'm making,
Mm-hmm.
this good food, which is less expensive and blah, blah. So if I'm in these states where I'm not quite so present, I'm not so high vibration, I'm afraid of all this stuff, and then I'll have a really bad reaction. Or if it's just like I just take it, like if I'm in that higher state of vibration, there's two things that happen. First, it might be that they have the snack, but they are done after that one snack, and then they ask for some like real food. Or they have all the snacks that they want, and then the next day they're tired of all that food and they actually want to eat a real meal. Kids are more in touch with their higher selves than we are as adults. Like we've really moved up into the mind by this point of our lives. But kids are super, super intuitive. And so they listen to their bodies. And so their bodies tell them, what they need. And they create circumstances to get them the nutrients and the food that they need. Um, there's a lot of caveats to that. Um, but in general, that's basically what happens. So there's your example. It's just one from one day to the next, depending on where I'm at, I might completely be like, why are you doing this? Stop eating this,
Mm-hmm.
trying to control everything. And other times it's like, okay, it doesn't matter. Let's just see how this plays out. Or maybe those things will come up and we can process those emotions together because we're creating that stuff together too. So,
Yeah, that's very powerful. I love how you share these personal stories from your life. Thank you
mm,
for opening up like that. Another powerful story that you told me was about how your son had told you about how he had an invisible dad that
yeah,
was telling him to do bad things.
yeah.
And at first you didn't know what to make of it, but then you realized that it was essentially like your shadow self that he was referring to.
hmm
Did I get that right? Or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So my oldest son is 5 years old, and we've been starting to talk a little bit about spirituality. Not from a religious, well, a little bit from a religious perspective because of our Christian background. It's been challenging actually, trying to figure out how to approach this with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But we do talk basically about the little light inside of us, that is everything. The same light that he has, I have. And so I was telling him that you can communicate with God. You can communicate with anything, but it's not going to come from hearing it or seeing it or smelling it. These are things that basically you have to tune in to hear them and see them. And that could be scary for a lot of people because to basically be okay with hearing voices and seeing things is considered to be like some kind of medical um, disease. So anyway, I was explaining this to him that this is all possible, and so he practiced, and I think he's getting more used to the idea of like being able to communicate with his highest self. And so one day he's like, I don't know, we had been there had been some especially strong tensions, I guess you could say. Like just we were angry and he was angry and everybody was wired up. We're like, what is going on? And he's like, Dad, it's my invisible dad it's doing this. Like, and he said that. I'm like, what? And it scared me at the time because I'm like, are you seeing things? Are you hearing things? But then I realized, okay, these are things that, again, I told him that this is okay to experience. Like he doesn't have to push this kind of stuff away because I think that we all experience this stuff as when we're kids, but adults are so quick to write it off that we just kind of pretty quickly forget it and write it off too. So anyway, he told me this once and maybe another couple times, like he really consistently stuck with this idea. He hasn't mentioned it in a little while, which could be a good sign, but he mentioned this a couple times. It's like, oh, it's my invisible dad that's making me misbehave. And just like you had said, after some time of thinking more about it, the invisible dad that he's referring to is this darker side that comes out on those days where I react negatively out of fear, instead of one, which is more connected to my inner node. And really what it is, it's like, it's not an entity or a demon per se, but instead, and this is what Sam had said while we were having this discussion down in El Salvador, you could look at it more like a fatherly field. So there is, a vibrational field that represents the relationship. You could look at it like a representation of the relationship of me to my dad, him to me, the men in our family, for generations to come, and in the past. And there's this big field, which is basically reflecting all of this in this three-dimensional game. And so he is, I think what's happening is he's experiencing the uncomfortable, the darkness of that dad field. And um, what's really cool about him being so young is that he's able to see it, but he's able to move through it pretty quickly. That's kind of one of the amazing things about kids is they're so malleable, but but the adults are the ones that hang on to and really solidify reality. So a lot of it is up to me, as dad, to work through that stuff on a spiritual level and let that stuff go. Because once I'm able to let go of it, he will just do it automatically, being so young. So yeah, being a dad is like the most, I would say, maturing and humbling experience that I've ever had in this in this experience, and I don't see how anything can ever compare to it. Like it's that huge, it's that amazing.
Yeah, what you're sharing, um, it kind of ties in directly to this really powerful idea that I've been thinking about lately about healing our ancestral trauma and noticing ancestral patterns that just get subconsciously passed on. And connecting this to Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin actually kind of got me thinking down this path because Bitcoin is all about seeing reality for what it is and not just accepting illusions. That's the deepest thing that I learned from Bitcoin is how much of our life is based on illusion that we just accepted.
Yeah,
And Bitcoin was the first time I really questioned some of these things that I just took for granted as just the way things are and
yeah,
that's reality. But
yeah,
once I looked at Bitcoin from the financial perspective, seeing how much of an illusion the financial system is, and then I carry that over to like the medical system and spirituality and religion, and just
yeah,
seeing for reality for what it is so powerful, and it's can be disorienting and very hard, but it's very powerful when you align with reality. And
yeah.
tying that into this idea of ancestral trauma is just kind of facing things instead of um, kind of like what you said. As adults, we just kind of brush them off, but just like your kid was aware that it's there, we're aware that it's there. We just
Yeah,
have become so accustomed to just not dealing with it.
exactly. Yeah, we just don't see it that way, you
Yeah.
know? He's actually doing he's in behavioral therapy, and I love the idea of it because it is based on something which is quite spiritual. So my it's funny because whenever we talk to the therapist to get updates and see how, how things are going with Arlo, because basically what it is, it's a time for the therapist and him to they play together, and she takes very careful note of her emotional state,
Mm,
because the whole idea of this type of therapy is that whatever emotions you're experiencing with another person, interacting with another person, it's shared. Like you're feeling the same essence. Um, and so um, I can't remember where I was going with that example now. See if I can. Hmm. Yeah, so it's like even just now during the silence, we feel this tension where it's like,
mm,
okay, when's he gonna say something? When is he, like we both feel that. Maybe we have different things mentally what are going on, but we're sharing
mm,
this moment together. Like we have a connection together. We formed a connection together right now because we are conversing. Like there is yeah, there's energy flowing between us. Um, and so kids are no different. And when when you get into these states of fear with them, when you get into these states of anger, you treat the emotion in a slightly different way uh than the kid because you are used to processing that emotion through or similar emotions through your whole life. Like you have mechanisms on how to deal with them. Mine is to get angry. Like I just get outwardly angry and frustrated, and sometimes I yell. And but like the kids, they're feeling it, but they just don't know what to do with it. And so sometimes they might start just running around and bouncing off the walls. So it's like the kids running around bouncing off the wall, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's like we're feeling basically the same kind of sensation, but we're treating it very differently. Um, we were never really taught as kids on how to process that emotion. Uh, so instead, we built these mechanisms to deal with it. So when we feel that overwhelming emotion, when the kid is running around like crazy and we just don't know what to expect, we don't know what he's doing. The room is super loud. It's overwhelming. I just don't like it. I'm super uncomfortable. He's feeling that same exact thing, but he's doing what his body wants to do. He's actually processing it because that's what he's just letting his body do it. Instead, like me as the adult, I'm drawing in, I'm getting mad. It's like, this needs to stop. I don't like it. This needs to stop. And so this is, I think, what happens with generational trauma is the kids come, they're like, hey, I'll process this. I'll take care of this. But you, as the adult, as the parent, have an opportunity. Are you going to be present? Are you going to let it go through? Are you going to let the kid help you process it? Or are you going to react? So in these instances where I get angry and like let's say I yell at him, he builds a safety structure around that emotion. He says, okay, it's not okay for me to act this way. Something I'm doing is wrong here. And then he then begins to solidify that. And that becomes trauma is like a strong word, but like we're kind of being traumatized as kids whenever we're not being taught or having the opportunity to process an emotion, we're like building these little pockets of trauma, which are forming our personality, forming our identity, for those first few years, and to really get us into that lower consciousness identity, that lower consciousness state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it kind of ties into the segue I wanted to make in terms of talking about the Bitcoin consciousness retreat that we were just at,
Yeah.
and the dojo experience, and
Incredible. Yeah.
we had talked about with Sam about how our minds can only really loop things. So we try to solve our problems by thinking about them, but really we can just keep looping them, and it doesn't really actually help that much to keep just thinking over and over about your problems, as opposed to just feeling your emotions, kind of like what you're talking about with your kids. They know how to feel their emotions, and how we've kind of lost that as adults. We forgot that your body is where you need to release your emotions, and that was such a powerful experience with at the Bitcoin consciousness retreat in the dojo with Sam, and just letting your letting your body do what it's going to do, and let your let your emotions just be released. So I'm just curious what because you got to spend more time there. So I'm really curious to hear what insights you had, and what you took away from your time there.
Yeah. One of my favorite takeaways, one of my favorite takeaways from being at the retreat, being at the dojo is I was laying on the concrete floor and I didn't have a shirt or shoes on. It's just, just a pair of shorts. It's awesome. I was laying on that floor in kind of the middle of the session, or a session was sort of ending. And I remember I just sitting there kind of laughing and be like, this is the most punk rock, cyberpunk place I've ever been, you know. Never in my life, maybe except for being a child, I suppose. But as an adult, I'm more complete, I guess. I've grown into, being a kid is awesome, but growing into your full to be a man is amazing. It really is. To be a full grown man is amazing. So like never in my adult life had I an opportunity to be somewhere where I'm able to process these things through my body. And here it is, kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not a particularly wealthy place. There's not, you know, uh, it was like off a dirt road. There was the homes along this dirt road were basically shacks. I mean, they had roofs, but really didn't have walls. There were clothes hanging on trees and hanging on ropes and stuff. And I mean, it was very compared to where I live now in the United States. I mean, you would consider these people homeless. So it's like the middle of the world, the world, and but everything you needed was there, and particularly the space that you needed to support you to just be who you needed to be in those times. And so in this little house that we're in, to be able to lay there and listen to the ocean and the chickens and the turkeys and you know and just be like on this dirty floor and swinging around these hammocks and stuff. It's just like and the work that you're doing vibrationally, the work that you're doing for your soul, for yourself, for your family, it's just so badass because it's like kind of this little hidden gem that like this is to me in that moment, I was like, this is the most important thing that I could be doing with my time here on this planet. And nobody knows about it. Like it is just so badass. So um so yeah, I suppose uh that kind of sums it up. Yeah.
And for the people watching or listening who don't know Sam, can you talk a little bit about Sam, and how you met him, and what you've learned from him?
Yeah, so I consider Sam to be first and foremost a friend, very good friend, probably one of my best friends at this point. Um, because we've been on a spiritual journey together for about 5 years. He's been a part of mine for 5 years. He's also, I would consider him a teacher as well. He was the one to start the Bitcoin Consciousness podcast. And um, I got connected to him through Twitter, actually. So he had been liking some of my tweets, and I was finding that the more well thought out, the more philosophical tweets he was like liking pretty consistently. And I was at the time I was playing with like, oh, I kind of want to build a following. I really wanted to make money in Bitcoin. I wanted to figure out how to make Bitcoin my career. And Sam was liking these more tweets that actually meant something to me, instead of because my Twitter, if you go way back, it's got some garbage on it, just trying to build a following. But so I appreciated that. And I'd be like starting to kind of look forward to getting these likes from Sama Kathara was his pseudonym at the time. And I went to his profile finally, and I saw that he did these like energy sessions. And so one thing led to another, and we did the one energy session together, and then one turned into basically like I don't know, 5 years of doing energy sessions. But over time it kind of went from him being the facilitator, the one to or the healer, the one to really work me through things, to me becoming powerful enough and decentralized enough to it just be a joint session of flow where we would go in and out of holding space and helping to heal one another. So, so yeah, getting to meet him, after 5 years of going through some of the deepest shit together. And this was all just over Signal. Like we were just doing voice calls, voice sessions, sometimes up to like 3 hours. I mean, we'd been through some deep work together. It was so surreal to get to meet him in person. And actually, when I left the dojo, I mean, we both bawled. We like we hugged him. We uh we cried for it felt like a long time, probably a couple minutes, but it was really hard. It was really hard to leave him. Um so yeah, I think I owe a lot to him and to his neutrality and to his strength because it's his dedication to decentralization that has sort of inspired me in my dedication to decentralization. Because what I'm finding over time, creating more content, getting better at elaborating, getting better at being comfortable sitting in the position of my highest self and just letting that speak, the more people want to hear me. And um, it gets uncomfortable from a fiat perspective because you get scared that what if I lose these people? Like I don't, but when you're decentralized, you're not afraid of that because all you're doing is being your authentic self. All you're doing is being from, connecting to your node. And so there are going to be times in flow where there's a lot of people who are listening to you who want to follow your example. And there'll be other times where perhaps you're not doing any podcasts for, a couple of years, or maybe you don't ever do one ever again. But, that's what living life connected to the highest self, in really, which is a life of flow, is universal flow, the flow of the ocean, the waves of the ocean. You're moving with something that is not from a place of fear or goal oriented or project being attached to ideas, but instead it's one that's like, what is my highest excitement right now? And being able to let go of the projects that being willing to let go of the projects that may come up in that higher excitement and let them go in the short term. So it's like the website is a great example of this. Like we got really excited to start up a Bitcoin consciousness website and we kind of got it built and stuff, but then you sort of like the emotion that I can describe is just like, or maybe I could give a sound. It's just like You get really excited, it feels really good, and then you start working on it, and then you start getting like kind of bogged down. It's like, you know, it's
Hmm.
like just too much the way that you feel it.
Hmm.
And so you sort of feel like building it anymore becomes more of a chore. And so when you're decentralized, the more that you can be decentralized, the easier it is for you to just like be okay not working on it. You know, you don't have to reject the project. You don't have to say, I'm done. I give up on this. But the project is there. And because we are able to do that and come back and forth, we find these times where, we're very interested, or I'm very interested in improving it, or he's very interested in, it completely changes with the way that with what we need it to be, or what the universe needs it to be. So yeah, some insights into decentralization.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, seeing Sam was really the first time I had really seen this concept of living in flow,
Mhm.
and the way he puts it into practice is so inspirational. And yeah, it was incredible to be able to meet him and see how he's living and see what he's created with that citadel out there.
Yeah,
And in El Salvador too is so powerful too because it
yeah,
feels like there's something powerful about the energy in El Salvador. I
yeah,
feel like it's at the forefront of this global shift, which
yeah.
is the same shift that Sam is heading as well. This
Hmm.
decentralized shift, the
Yeah,
shift from 3D to 5D.
yeah. Yeah, and the thing that I really appreciate about Sam and his decentralization is like, we talk about him as he's like sort of this leading figure, but he's not really striving to be that. That's not like his primary goal. It just kind of happens. There was a time, and I would say for myself as well, because I'm getting more comfortable with the idea, but there was a time where he just outright rejected any kind of centralization. It was like, if you try to put me in this bubble of like being a leader, or,
Mm-hmm.
like being something that is above yourself, then I'm not really interested. You're missing the point. That's not decentralization. And now we're starting to, yeah, he's starting to become more comfortable with having conversations, having people project upon him in this way, because again, he's becoming more comfortable in his decentralization. He knows that this is the way that people are going to see him, and there's nothing he's going to do about it except for just be himself. And he's not striving for more people to like honor him, or anything like that. It's just like, I'm setting an example. And that's the thing that we would always come back to in our sessions, when we would talk about, maybe even podcasts too, when we would talk about leadership. It's like, but still, don't you need leadership? Like, don't human beings strive for leadership? Don't we admire one another? Like, this is just kind of a natural occurring thing, especially in this day and age where everything is built around hierarchical structures and all this kind of stuff. How do we fit into that? And that was always the answer that would come up, is you just lead by example. Keep leading by example. You don't have to forcefully organize or try to do anything. It's more so just like be a shining beacon that will inspire other people, and, stay strong in your node, and things will work out. But it's not going to be like you're the president of this organization and that's how you're going to be for 20 years. It's instead like, I am a shining example for Dr. Satoshi for maybe a couple days, and he got the inspiration that he needed, and now he's on to the next thing. That's like really what decentralization, or decentralized leadership, I guess you could
Mm-hmm.
consider. So
Can you talk a little bit more about what it means to connect to your inner node?
yeah. Hmm. So I'll just like give everybody an example. Like, we can all do a little exercise right now. So so when we meditate, I assume that a lot of people, if they're interested in the subject of spirituality, have tried some form of meditation before. And so that's what I want everybody to just try right now. Hopefully, if you're driving, maybe pause and just get into that comfortable meditative state, whatever that means to you. Okay, and so what you're going to find when you get into this state is you're going to hear probably a lot of things going on in your mind. But that's all part of it. What you're doing right now, what your mind is doing right now, because it's so hyperactive, is it's processing those thoughts because those thoughts will eventually lead to something. They will lead to either a dead end where they will just float away, or they will lead to an emotion, which will try to drive you out of your meditation, or it will give you an opportunity to process it. Right. So a very common thing that happens to all of us when we meditate is, okay, the meditation is not the primary aspect of my life. It is secondary. And so when the things of my quote unquote real life come, I have to go and do those things. And so those thoughts come in, those emotions come in. Okay, it's time to be done meditating. I have to go and make breakfast now. I have to go and answer this email now. Okay, it's time to be done. Those are the emotions that I'm talking about. Those are the things that, how long can you sit and feel those things deeply? That's it, man. That's it. That's what being connected to your highest self is. That's just like a higher state of being where you become so comfortable with who you are, things become way less serious and way more fun.
Yeah, that was powerful. Thank you for
Yeah,
guiding us
yeah,
through that.
yeah. Thanks for being a part of it. It was cool.
And I know you do the node to node healing sessions. I saw that
Yeah.
on the Bitcoin Consciousness website,
Hmm.
and I've
Yeah.
actually done one with Sam, and then also with Oro. So I've
Yeah.
experienced them. I've,
Yeah.
and my wife is also certified in Reiki, and she's done like remote sessions as well.
That's
So
awesome.
I'm definitely familiar with it, and I've seen and felt for myself how these remote healing sessions can be profound. Whereas
Seriously,
before
yeah.
I had experienced it, I would have written it off and said, if you're not there together with the person, how could it possibly have such a deep effect?
Right.
But I felt it, and it defies logic. And as a logical thinker, it really doesn't make
Really
sense.
hard, isn't it? Yeah.
But how would you explain how these remote healing sessions happen?
Mhm. You're 100% correct. It's very hard to convince someone of this stuff from a logical perspective because it doesn't make sense. Now, you and I communicating about it right now because we're in a higher state, it's it's integrating, it's hitting the right spots. It just makes sense right now. My biggest hang up, my biggest roadblock, my biggest like logical roadblock that always comes in for me is my dad. It's like, how would I explain all this to my dad? Because he's super logical. He's very humble, spiritually, willing to accept that there is something greater than him, and he knows that. He's very humbled by that idea. But when it comes to these practices, which are not essentially validated by, you could say, the blockchain of Christianity or some other major religion, it's confusing. It's like, how do you know you're not just deluding yourself or being tricked by somebody? And from that lower level of consciousness, there is no proof, right? The proof is in doing the session. The proof is in experiencing it for yourself. The only thing that I can say to the person in the lower vibration who you're trying to quote unquote convince or maybe be more in like a debative stance is you might just ask them to be honest with themselves about how their emotions are regulating their lives and the way that they dictate their lives, because they are dealing with emotions every single day, and emotions are driving all of their actions every single day. It's I don't think anybody can deny that, and if you are denying that, maybe that is a delusion. Uh, so those same emotions, which are driving your actions, all day long, every day, we're just viewing them from a different lens, from a higher perspective, and we're allowing them a completely different space. And once you're in that space, then you have your proof, you know. So that lower consciousness mind, oh well, I don't think it will until you're willing to let that identity go. It's always going to call this stuff into question. Like I still am second guessing myself, sometimes it's like I almost have to remember some of the experiences that I had.
Mm-hmm.
I have a really, really cool example, but like from the retreat, I have to recall back some of the most powerful experiences that I have to be like, yeah, this is real, Caleb. This is real. You're not deluding yourself. You're not being duped. Like this is really happening. So I can't remember the exact question that you asked, but did that answer
I can't remember what I asked either, but
it?
I love the
Oh,
direction.
remotely.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
remotely.
remote
How does this
viewing.
work
Yeah,
remotely?
yeah,
Yeah, so it's no different than, we're
yeah.
having this conversation right now and we're exchanging ideas, we're exchanging emotions, we're experiencing the joy, the laughter as we just did with one another. And so you do the exact same thing when you're in these node to node sessions. Now, as we're discovering, from the retreat, being in person is a whole nother level.
Hmm.
But yeah, being connected through voice is enough to get each other aligned and comfortable and make a huge difference.
We kind of touched upon this earlier, and then I heard you talk about it in another podcast you were on about how we always have just been trained to avoid difficult conversations and difficult emotions.
Yeah,
Do you think that's a fiat culture thing? Like fiat culture, just it pushes emotional avoidance, whereas decentralization requires more emotional maturity. Do you think they go hand in hand?
it's an interesting question. Yeah, so the reason that we avoid difficult conversations is because if you were to genuinely inspect them, even from a philosophical standpoint, if you were to genuinely inspect and be so open-minded to the point where you would be willing to allow your models to completely crash, it would end, it would invariably, it would end in some kind of emotional upheaval because you can only get so far when you have these really staunch beliefs. You can only get so far. So like think about politics, for instance. Most politics is super it's very popular to be aligned with a good political cause, right? And you know people feel good about that. People feel good that it's like this is really important. This is important for me and my family and my future and for society to function well. And this is all super important. But then if these two vehemently opposed people come together and they were to, again, just like have an open conversation that is philosophical, but be willing to genuinely allow the other person's perspective to come in and tear their own perspective down, they would get to a point where it's like, oh, I see the emotional attachment here. I see the emotional foundation, the silly emotional foundation of this part of my identity, right? And people don't want to go that far. People don't want to first of all, we're all so wrapped up in those identities that to have them torn down is really, really uncomfortable. So yeah, I think that is, you're 100% correct. I think that it has everything to do with this fiat nature of having this external identity, which is defined by things outside of you. What do you have? What have you done? What have you accomplished? Instead of who are you inside?
Yeah, thank you. That was very, very deep answer. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you about interdimensional beings. You have that um, on your profile on Bitcoin consciousness, and
Yeah.
you list that as one of the things that you can help people with or make sense of connections that they might be having with these interdimensional beings. And I'm well aware that people might think this sounds crazy, but
Yeah, me too.
um, I went to a Joe Dispenza conference and it shocked me that he actually talked about interdimensional beings. He said it's very common for them to come to his conferences where you can imagine there's like 2,000 people where he gets them meditating for 7 days. So the consciousness is just so high. And he says that the interdimensional beings, they like that because they're when people are at normal consciousness, they can't the interdimensional beings can't really interact with them because there's such a divide. But when you get this group of 2,000 people raising into consciousness, they can actually get to a level where they can actually interact with these interdimensional beings. And at these conferences, it's not unusual for people to have these like miraculous healings. People that couldn't walk for 20 years, all of a sudden being able to walk.
Mhm,
And they sometimes attribute it to these interdimensional beings helping with the healings. But
mhm.
I was just curious. I was really excited when I saw that you had that on your profile. Like,
Yeah.
what is your experience with interdimensional beings?
So, I have interdimensional beings in my on that profile. Mm, well, I put it on there mostly as a curiosity, right? Because I've always been very open-minded to that idea and super interested to listen to people channel. If listeners are not familiar with channeling, with what channeling is, um, you could say that, the very first the very first and easiest form of channeling that anybody can do is channeling your highest self. So, that little meditation that we did there where, I felt very connected to my highest self. It felt like I was talking from a higher perspective, which was my own. Um, I personally have not, at least knowingly, experienced channeling of an interdimensional being, which let's say identifies as um, Toth or some like Mary Magdalene or some of these, like, you ever listen to Next Level Soul, some of the people that will channel there. I've never experienced it in that way. Um, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way that my mind comes in and is quick to label, quick to want to be like, oh, is this who? Who is this? Who is this? Um, so I think I have experienced this kind of stuff before where I've communicated with these interdimensional beings, but not to the point where I've surrendered enough to allow myself to accept or identify who and what these beings are. So I've more so communicated with them like on a vibrational level
Mm.
and just experiencing it's like something. It's like there's something different here. I don't know what it is. Um, One example of this was actually Sam and I had a session where we had some light language coming through and it sounded like very kind of shamanic or Native American. And we just kind of started laughing, just kind of like talking and laughing. And we weren't speaking English. We were just, well, in Christianity, you call it speaking in tongues. Um, but we just like, and we didn't know what we were saying, but at the end, we're like, so what do you think that was? We were both like, I think we were just laughing about how, how wrapped up each other was and how serious we were taking all of this crap, all of this fiat nature around us, you know. So
Mhm.
I was kind of imagining like these two old, like Native American tribes got men sitting in a teepee around a fire, maybe smoking a pipe or something, and they have everything they need, right? They've eaten probably a meal for the day. They have hardly any clothes on. They're sitting on a dirt floor or in the grass or whatever, and they're projecting themselves into our experience and experiencing all of the stuff that we're surrounding ourselves with, all the fears, all the worries, all the nonsense. This, yeah, the illusions that we talked about. And they're just like, what the hell have these people gotten themselves into, you know? So that was my one of the examples that I had with interdimensional beings, and I also think you had a great description there from the Joe Dispenza
Mhm.
retreat, because yeah, it's basically um there is a one of my favorite Incubus songs, actually. If you like Incubus, there's a song on their album Science, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a pretty heavy song. I like heavy music too. It's a pretty heavy song, but in that song, there's a little clip that says, since the charting of the initial electromagnetic spectrum, the humans have learned that what they can touch, smell, see, and hear is less than 1 millionth of reality. And God, I hope that's true because I quoted that a lot. But I'm pretty sure it's true because look at all the signals we have flying around and
Mhm.
not interfering with one another. But so if that is reality, so then we know that we're living in less than 1 millionth of reality right now, what we're experiencing. So then there is no, who's to say that there is n no possibility that there can't be other sentient life forms living in these v other vibrational fields which we can't experience with our five senses. Who's to say that, we're the only beings in this universe that perhaps there are other beings that came here first and they evolved. They went through the exact same transformations that we're going through spiritually, and they've elevated themselves vibrationally to a point where they've just vibrated out of what our senses can even perceive. Um, so yeah, that's my experience with interdimensional beings and what I understand them to be.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I talk about that a lot about how our reality that we think of is really only just 0.001% of everything that exists. It's exactly what you just said.
Yeah,
So then what's going on in the other 99.999%? And
exactly.
why are we not open to crazy stuff happening in those realms and we just can't
Yeah,
see it?
seriously. I mean, how how misaligned or how self important do we think we are to say that, okay, we know from a science perspective, we know that we're experiencing less than a millionth of reality, but yet we're just going to say that, no, this is it. Like it just doesn't scientifically make any sense because the scientific method tells us to test and retest and test and retest, and you can't do that with the rest of. I mean, you're not even willing to do that with the rest of reality. Like it doesn't even make sense with the scientific method. So yeah, it all falls apart.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really blows my mind about Bitcoin is that I feel like it comes from one of these other realms. It doesn't come from this 0.001% realm that we're currently living in. And it feels like we're touching something from a different realm. And it's bridging different realms in a way that we've never seen before, which is makes it
Mhm.
just so powerful and mystical. And
Yeah.
it kind of takes this energy from these other realms, but it solidifies it in the physical realm in a very real way. But yet we're drawing on this energy from another realm.
Yeah. I mean, you could look at it like, you know, fiat money in Bitcoiner circles is often blamed for all of our problems. that we're experiencing as a human race. But if you take the decentralized consciousness perspective where everybody is creating their own reality, we have as human beings collectively, consciously created the whole reality at once, and fiat money is just one of the symptoms of it. And human beings are waking up to the illusions of this reality, to the silliness of all of the fear that's guiding our lives. And Bitcoin is a reflection, I think, of that elevated consciousness of mankind.
Yeah, that was a great way to put it. This has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you for
Yeah, yeah.
for being willing to go down these crazy rabbit holes.
Thank you, because I mean, I've been trying to go down these crazy rabbit holes my whole life. So
Yeah.
it's super fun.
Anything else you wanted to add before we close it out?
Maybe let's check. Okay, so yeah, so Bitcoin consciousness. Really excited to continue being a beacon of decentralization, to continue growing the community, to continue inviting people into the group right now. Right now we share we share a lot of stuff through the Telegram group. There's also a Signal group. I have a group on Keat as well. That's kind of the essence of the way that the Bitcoin consciousness community connects. But it is a decentralized project. So if anybody is interested in exploring these topics and just needs a way to get them out there, the Bitcoin consciousness platform is a great way to do that. We're happy, if you if we share similar values, we're happy to post content on the website. That can be the primary place you post it. You don't have to buy a domain or anything like that. You can host your own podcast episodes and communicate with people about topics you're interested about and learning about. That's a great place for that. Or if you already have something started, if you are writing a book or if you offer healing sessions, if you're at all interested in sharing some of the things that you already have and you have a platform for, the Bitcoin consciousness groups are great ways to do that. And finally, if you're just interested in exploring this with like-minded people, check it out. I'll give you the link so that you have that to the Telegram group and the Signal group for the description so that people can just join there. Also check out bitcoin-consciousness.com. That's the website where you can find everything as well. And then you can find the Bitcoin Consciousness podcast on most of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're not on Apple yet. Really felt, Nobody's really felt inspired to get that one going yet because I think it might require an ID or something to host there. So we haven't done that one yet, but you can host. We have the RSS feed is just hosted right on the website, so you can subscribe directly to the RSS, just self-hosted. So that's pretty cool. What else? Am I missing anything? No, this has been a super fun conversation. It's been really fun getting to meet you, and I've loved coming onto the podcast. Oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to add about the podcast in particular is like we produce the episodes in flow, so because it's decentralized. So if you see that a new podcast hasn't been released in even a year, subscribe anyway because it might just be that nobody's felt like posting anything, having a conversation in a while. I'm finding right now that I'm having several podcast conversations all at once. So we're gonna have a group of episodes that are published for a while, and then who knows what will happen, and maybe the wave will keep coming. So that's just kind of the nature of creating in flow. You never know how
Mhm.
the schedule. So
You reminded me of one last question that I wanted
Yeah,
to ask about.
great, great.
This is something that really frustrates me. I try not to let it frustrate me, but just
Yeah.
seeing people in the spiritual community and what their values are, and then being so connected in the Bitcoin communities. I know that all these people in the spiritual community, if they just knew what Bitcoin really was, they would easily be
Yeah,
converted into Bitcoiners. But
right.
what I'm seeing is most people, even though they're very spiritual, they don't see what Bitcoin really is. Whereas if they just knew what it was, then we'd have a whole new cohort of people coming on as spiritual Bitcoiners.
Hmm.
But what are your thoughts on how we can get more people in the spiritual community to see what Bitcoin really is? Because I think that that's all it would take, and they would get orange pilled so quickly if they just
Yeah.
if they just knew what it was.
It's exactly what you're doing.
Mhm.
It's what you're doing right here is creating. Just create,
Mhm.
create, create from your highest self, from your highest passion. It is, I don't, evangelism is a very loaded word, but it's, you know, because we feel, especially early on in the Bitcoin journey, we feel so passionate to share this message of Bitcoin and all that it can fix. We want everybody to just understand it. We just want people to get it. But looking back on my own journey into Bitcoin, it actually was the genuine passion that I could hear in Guy Swan's voice when I was listening to his podcast, and I subscribed to his podcast, and I didn't know what he was saying half the time when he would read his articles, but I could feel hear and feel the genuine passion in his voice, and that was what got me down the rabbit hole. So it just doesn't come in the way that you would think it would. You'd think you'd be able to like give an elevator pitch or give somebody the right book or something, but it's not handing the book to somebody, it's the book being on the shelf and that person going to the shelf and with their own being led by their highest excitement.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think you're doing the absolutely doing the right thing. You're building from this space. You're being that beacon of light. And I know it's frustrating because it's like, dang man. But if you just keep shining and keep working on what you need to work on, you're doing exactly what needs to be done.
Thank you. I
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Hmm.
It kind of touches on this other thing I've been thinking about too, about how when we're doing stuff like this, we're so conditioned to measure our success based on fiat metrics, like views and subscribers. Whereas in the
Hmm.
decentralized world, those things are much less relevant. So how do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a hard time with that too. Especially at the beginning, because so the podcast was initially hosted on Spotify, and I found myself looking at the metrics and being really uncomfortable, like, oh, is this getting enough views? Oh, what am I doing? I need to be, and I did go through a phase two of creating some podcast and a newsletter with the idea of just of bringing more people on board and creating value and also trying to kind of make it a business as well. But it was still like somewhat of a mixed intention, and I knew that going into it. So I've played around with it. It's been an ever evolving journey where it's like, okay, I'm willing to play the game of the metrics. I'm willing to play the game of doing the right search engine optimization and trying to get the quantifiable results that I want to see. And for me, after a little while of doing that, it was like I noticed the discomfort of doing that from a higher perspective, from the perspective of the node. And the node, then my node basically was like, okay, I felt good letting go.
Mhm.
If does that make sense? So it's
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
yeah, so it was like it came in. very important. It's like, yeah, this is what I got to do, and I have a higher intention. But then after a while, the metrics just didn't matter. Like, um, and I'm not saying that that is what's going to happen. That was just my experience, you know. It could very well be that your highest excitement is in watching those numbers go up. You know, if that's what feels good to you, then that's what's meant to be, you know, and what's meant to be in this present moment. So don't look for my experience in your own. You know, just keep following that highest passion and be honest with yourself. Are following the fiat those fiat measures, does it still feel good from a higher perspective? Then heck yeah, keep doing it. But if it's something that is making you somewhat uncomfortable, it's like, gosh, this is just too much. This is taking more away from my creativity than energy than it's lending me, then maybe it is time to let it go.
Yeah, I really appreciate your advice because it comes from a lived experience. And what you're talking about kind of highlights this central tension between fiat and the decentralized world.
Yeah,
Because
balancing between the two.
if we're all
Hmm.
following our highest excitement, um, but yet we're still in the fiat world, we're in this
Hmm.
kind of liminal space right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were trying to make money off it and turn Bitcoin into a way that you make money. And that's what you have to do in the fiat world. You have to make money. So how have you resolved that tension between following your highest passion, even if it doesn't make money,
Yeah,
while
yeah.
living in the fiat world where you have to make money?
I haven't resolved it.
Yeah. And how are
Uh,
how are we as humanity gonna resolve that tension? How is that gonna get worked out? Because
um,
it's easy to say just follow your highest passion, but at the end of the day, you got to feed your kids
yeah,
and
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, so I can tell you where I'm at right now with this balancing act. So right now, the highest excitement, which is leaning into the fiat doing to get make money type stuff. I'm feeling very excited about computer programming, learning vibe coding, like learning how to really vibe code well, because I really like computers. And I feel very excited whenever I have the opportunity to learn more about how to do something really cool. And so it's like there is a higher excitement there, which is like there's this thing that I really want to learn, and then there's also the part of it which is exciting that it could potentially be a way for me to make money. Um, and I just have to see how it plays out. There is, I think, what a lot of people find there's a balancing act between the times where you're meditating and the identity, the fiat identity, and the way that you interact with the world at large. And basically, the higher self is creating all of reality, even the stuff that you don't like so much, even the fiat stuff that's like, gosh, I can't believe I'm still involved in this stuff. It's still creating that kind of stuff. Um, and so it's sort of an automatic process where your higher self will become more and more involved and more confident over time. So that's going to happen through some might call it like shadow work or Reiki sessions or healing. And so more and more over time, as you do this work and your highest self finds those opportunities to come through and do the work that it wants to do, it begins dissolving those identities, and those identities begin playing themselves out. So a common story, and again, maybe don't attach yourself to this, but use it as a potential way to view your life up to this point. As you could say that's like I have times in my life of like deep spiritual awakening where everything sort of falls apart. I get really excited about spirituality, and then I get really scared and I need to go back to fiat life and I need to go start making money or whatever it is that you got to do. You'll find that those times of lower consciousness, fiat identity will also then dissolve. So it's like you'll go back and forth. You'll get really excited spirituality, then you'll get really excited or maybe fearful in the fiat identity, and then that'll play itself out. So it's just this is really, again, it's really automatic. You're not really doing or forcing anything. Uh, the soul has a path that it is destined for. In fact, as even Joe Dispenza, he likes to point out that time is not linear, and so this is all playing out exactly the way that it's meant to play out. And so it's hard because you think that you have a decision. Um, it seems like you have a decision, right? Like I can choose to be in higher vibration. I can choose to sit down and meditate. But yet but yet fate also seems like a real thing. And it's like if time doesn't exist, then everything's already actually decided, even though I'm thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. Thinking layers of things. So it gets so confusing trying to balance between these two things. And it really just comes down to trusting the process and having and holding as much unconditional love for it, I think, that you can. Because yeah, I mean, when I'm in those fiat mindsets where I'm in having those days where I'm parenting, where I'm being a dad out of fear, I tend to judge myself pretty hard because I've had these experiences now. I've had these experiences from my higher self, and it's like I sort of beat the lower self will beat the lower self up because it's like, you know better than this. You don't need to be doing this. But it's like, but you're here doing this. This is just part of the process. So the more that you can, it's just about allowing that unconditional love to just continue shining through.
Yeah, it always comes down to unconditional love, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and unconditional love is also, I think, a loaded term because people don't really know what it means until you really begin to explore it. Um, a great a great way to look at it, a great way to look at it might be to just call it neutrality. So it is to experience the experience without trying to change it,
Mm.
right? Just like be with that experience. That is unconditional love. So if you are unconditionally loving yourself, you're not judging yourself at any point in time. You're allowing yourself to have that experience and understand that there are times where you're going to kind of fall back asleep during your experience. You're going to step out of that higher consciousness guidance. And then the awareness that comes in that says, hey, that was lower consciousness. That awareness, having unconditional love in that moment where it's like, oh, okay, I didn't need to do that. So it can sort of pave a little bit of a path for you so that the next time that you get maybe down into like some similar sleepiness and you start falling for some of those old fears and old patterns, that you can become aware a little sooner before you act and you're able to process before you act. Yeah. So neutrality is like unconditional love because unconditional love is the base layer. And I think that the reason that we say unconditional love is because it's like the closest love is like the closest feeling that we can equate to being neutral, right? I guess because it's like it's just there. Like when you think back to being a child and being in the embrace of a parent or a sibling or somebody that you just really love, it's like you don't care about anything. You're neutral about everything. You just are so feeling so good about being in that moment with that person. That's yeah. So neutrality and unconditional love are kind of like the same thing.
That's such a fascinating concept. I've never thought about it like that. I'll
Hmm.
have to kind of think about that a little bit deeper. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's powerful. You've just been
Yeah, because
dropping. one powerful insight after another.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you're
Yeah.
getting a lot of value. So, um, yeah, because I think the reason that I I like to throw in the neutrality is because when we think of love, we think of something very specific, and so you tend to want to push for that, right? So when you're beating yourself up in those times, it's like, no, I need to love myself. What does that feel like to love myself? That feels like an action instead of neutrality is more of like a reset. It's more of a letting go. You're not doing anything. You're allowing that thing to process. You're allowing yourself to get to that back to that base layer, which again, yeah, you could describe as like unconditional love. Just like let the unconditional love let it flow through.
And that is so powerful. I can already tell that's going to be super helpful on my spiritual journey going forward.
Awesome.
That's
That's
such a
great.
powerful nugget of wisdom right there.
Cool,
But
cool.
but
It makes me feel super good because
yeah,
I've been talking about this with people for for a while now, and yeah, feel like I've just I feel like I've just been learning so much from other people. So it's always really cool to be able to put the stuff I've learned from other people into practice and then share it and have it feel so valued to other people. A prime example of creating from the highest self, that's what the podcast is all about. It's just like, okay, I really am curious to learn more from this person. And what they taught me, I was able to put into practice and get my own perspective on it, not turning it into a religion, but use it in my own tool set and then experience it in my own way. And now I can share my experience with other people like yourself and inspire other people. So that's pretty awesome. Feels good.
yeah, I see so much potential for Bitcoin consciousness and what you've created because I've been thinking a lot about how Bitcoiners are going to be stewards of this new world, this new earth that we're stepping into. And
Right.
the Bitcoin consciousness community, that could just be the perfect place for the stewards of this new world to all kind of connect and exert influence through what you've created.
Right. Right. Yeah. Cause, yeah, it gets a little scary because you're like, ah, but this is supposed to be decentralized. And, so, it gets a little scary from that perspective, um, but I think you're totally right. This is the path that you and I have gone down with Bitcoin moving so quick into spirituality. I think it is one that is inevitable for a lot of Bitcoiners. I think that eventually the new Earth might not even it'll be more of just a straight up spiritual shift instead of one that comes from the lens of Bitcoin. Yeah. Um, so yeah, for those people who it's just like lighting candles. It's like we all have these candles and the flames burn bright and once we just light each other's candles, we're all the same, but we just share that and we share that spark with one another and provide a space, provide some mental models, right? Because that's what we're doing in this podcast. Yes, we did have some higher vibrational stuff that we did do, like the little meditation, for instance. That's something like more vibrational, but most of the conversation is through mental models. So these mental models are by no means the truth and the only truth. They are simply just one perspective of what one person or two people to believe to be the truth, but they're still very helpful in helping other people to discover what that means.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. I know we went over. I really appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. I'm happy to go over. It's very energizing and it's getting later in the evening for me, but it might be hard for me to fall asleep. So, just so excited. So
Well,
it's been
yeah,
fun and I really appreciate you having me on.
we'll have to do it again sometime for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
that would be awesome.
uh,
Yeah, you're doing great work. I really appreciate everything that you do. And I know that it's hard because yeah, you do feel like this pressure to do all the metrics and make everything
Mhm.
look right and all that kind of stuff. But I think you're I think you're doing a great job. So
Really appreciate that.
hmm
All right.
yeah, I look
And
forward to seeing your following continue to grow.
appreciate that. Yeah. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
good.
Take care.
You too.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise. It doesn't lie. It doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on The Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the signal.